She didn't look like a fighter. Not when she stepped through the door in an old pair of joggers. Not when they handed her a waiver without eye contact. Not even when the jokes started small, sharp, meant to cut just deep enough to remind her she didn't belong. But she didn't flinch. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she'd been here before. In rooms where silence had teeth. In places where your worth had to prove itself over and over just to be tolerated. She knew what it was to be underestimated, to be forgotten, to fold her strength into stillness, just to survive the day. And yet she showed up. Not for applause, not to reclaim a title, but for something far more private, far more sacred. To remember who she used to be before life asked her to forget. This is the story of Danielle Harperand. The night a quiet woman walked into a loud room and changed everything without ever raising her voice. Now, let's get started. It was the kind of evening where the wind in Columbus carried the last breath of autumn, cool enough to sting, quiet enough to think. Danielle Harper pulled into the parking lot of Steel Core MMA Gym, with the windows halfway down and the heater off, just the way she liked it. No music, no noise, just the sound of her own breath, calm but tightly held. She sat still for a moment, both hands on the wheel, staring at the glowing red sign above the gym entrance. It blinked slightly, like it hadn't fully decided whether to stay on. Neither had she. Inside, the place was already alive. The low hum of fans overhead, the squeak of bare feet on worn mats, heavy thuds of bodies hitting the floor, slaps, laughter. Instructions barked, in short, clipped tones. Every sound announced. This was a space where presence was earned, not assumed. Danielle stepped through the glass doors wearing a faded gray hoodie and black joggers. No logos, no flair, just clean, functional comfort. She walked past a group of young men clustered near the front counter. One of them glanced up, then leaned over to whisper to another, just loud enough to be heard. PTA mom got lost on the way to spin class. They chuckled. She didn't flinch. The kid at the front, desk early 20s, backwards cap, AirPods dangling from his lid, a clipboard toward her without looking up. Waiver and liability release. First class? Sort of, she said softly. He didn't ask what that meant, just pointed her to a bench near the wall. Nobody greeted her. Nobody offered to show her around. Just a nod in the general direction of the locker room and a vague grunt that might have meant, good luck. Danielle sat down, unzipped her gym bag, and began removing her shoes. Her movements were methodical, unhurried. She folded her hoodie, tucked it neatly beside her, revealing a plain navy blue t-shirt and a black compression top underneath. Nothing about her screamed athlete. She looked like someone who'd brought a kid to karate and decided to stay. Around her, the gym buzzed with kinetic energy. Groups of men and a few women paired up across the mats, laughing, sprawling, shouting corrections. Everyone seemed to know everyone. That same thick camaraderie that always left strangers standing a few inches outside the circle. Coach Daniels stood near the far end, arms crossed, clipboard in hand, mid-50s, ex-Marine energy, voice like crushed gravel. He glanced at Danielle once, said nothing, and went back to correcting a teenage boy's guard pass. Danielle tied her drawstring tighter and sat quietly. She didn't stretch, didn't fidget. Just watched, hands resting loosely on her thighs, her breathing slow and deliberate like she was remembering a rhythm her body used to know by heart. A tall man with a deep voice, Jace Miller, noticed her and smirked. "Hope she signed the waiver," he muttered to the girl beside him. "I'm not catching a lawsuit when she trips on her own shoelaces." Laughter again, just enough to make sure she could hear it. Danielle looked down, adjusted her laces, and said nothing. Coach finally clapped his hands. Warm-ups. Pair up. People moved quickly to find their usual partners. Danielle waited, unnoticed. At the last minute, a nervous teenager named Elliot shyly waved her over. "You can go with me if you want." She nodded. "Thanks." They began shrimping across the mat. Danielle's movements were fluid, tight, nothing flashy, but sharp. A few of the white belts noticed. One nudged the other. She moves better than most people here. But Jace wasn't watching warm-ups. He was too busy rehashing his last tournament, lost blaming the ref, the weather, the mat, and anything else that deflected from the truth. After warm-ups, Coach split the group. White belts over here, colored belts with me. Danielle walked with the beginners. Jace saw it and couldn't resist. Guess they're giving her the kindergarten class. Should have brought crayons. This time, fewer people laughed. Becca, one of the women who had chuckled earlier, kept her eyes on Danielle instead. Danielle paired with Elliot again. He moved with hesitation. She guided him gently. "You're doing fine," she said. "Hereditary, anchoring your elbow more before you turn your hips." "You've done this before," he said, surprised. "A little," she replied. The drills continued. Danielle never drew attention to herself, but Coach Daniels began watching her movements more closely. The way her hips shifted, the way her base never overextended, the way she adjusted without overthinking. "Where have you trained before?" he asked casually, kneeling beside her. "Different places," she replied. He nodded, unconvinced. Jace leaned over to Becca again. "She's hiding something. Cardio kickboxer, I bet. Probably watched too much UFC and thought this would be cute." But Becca wasn't listening anymore. Her eyes stayed locked on Danielle, quiet, composed, and entirely out of place in the way only someone who didn't belong could still command the room. By the time sparring was announced, the tension had shifted. Subtle, but undeniable. The air in the room wasn't just sweat and expectation anymore. It was curiosity. Danielle stayed seated, waiting, not asking, not offering. Until Jace stood. He grinned like he was about to teach a lesson. "Yo," he called across the room. "Danielle, right? Wanna roll?" She looked up. No tension in her shoulders. No hesitation in her breath. "Sure," she said. The mat felt familiar beneath her bare feet, too familiar. As Danielle walked toward Jace, her steps were steady, but inside, 1,000 memories stirred. They didn't roar. They pulsed, like a second heartbeat. Jace bowed with a theatrical flourish mocking tradition. "Don't worry," he grinned. "I'll go easy." Danielle simply bowed in return, no words, no smirk, just presence. They touched hands, bumped fists, and the gym went quiet, as if every breath was holding something back. Danielle pulled guard immediately. No dramatic motion, no aggression, just timing, just precision. Jace stumbled half a step, confused. The moment stretched, a pivot of her hips, a slip of her leg. His base crumbled. Before he could register what was happening, her left calf hooked, her thigh clamped, a full triangle choke, locked clean. His hands flailed for a moment, trying to posture out. Danielle didn't tighten. She didn't need to. She adjusted slightly, maybe an inch. That was all it took. Jace tapped. 3 silent slaps on the mat. 14 seconds. Danielle released the hold instantly, rolled to a seated position, and bowed again, not to him, but to the space between them. The crowd didn't clap. They didn't know how. Becca's jaw had dropped slightly. Elliot's eyes widened. Coach Daniels blinked, slow and sharp. "That wasn't luck," he muttered. Jace lay flat, blinking at the ceiling like it had betrayed him. Danielle stood, brushed off her pants, and walked calmly back to the wall. She didn't look for approval, didn't glance around the room. She picked up her towel, wiped her brow, and sat with her knees folded like she was waiting for a buzznet, like she had just dismantled a man twice her size with surgical control. But as she sat, the weight of that moment folded in on itself. Because Danielle hadn't come here to choke anyone out. She came because 1 week ago, she'd stood in her kitchen reheating leftover chicken thighs when she saw a folder on the counter labeled College Info. Noah, her son, 17, independent. Growing too fast. He hadn't asked for help. He never did. And she wondered, when was the last time she'd shown him who she was? Later that night, while scrolling through old photos to find something for his senior yearbook, she stumbled on a video saved under a name she didn't recognize. It opened with a grainy clip from an open-air gym in Austin. The video stuttered, but she knew the woman in it. Her younger self, 20s, hair in braids, sweating through a soaked gi in the Texas heat. Her face then was tight with focus, her limbs crisp with confidence. She watched herself work through collar drags and guard passes like she was solving a puzzle she already knew the answer to. Danielle had watched it twice, then again. Noah walked in around midnight and caught her watching. "That you?" he asked, tilting his head. Danielle only nodded. "Dang, you were kind of a beast." She smiled, but didn't say anything. She turned off the TV, said goodnight, and laid in bed staring at the ceiling for hours. That video didn't make her miss competition. It made her miss knowing herself. Because that gym in Austin wasn't just a training ground, it was her lifeline. After her divorce, when her ex-husband moved out without a word and her friends stopped calling because they didn't know how to be around pain that didn't explain itself, Danielle had needed something to hold on to. Something real. Something that didn't pity her. She walked into that Jiu-Jitsu academy by accident, chasing a Groupon for a boot camp class. But by the second week, when she stayed late to watch the advanced rolls and saw how the room moved like music without Melodish knew. She never posted photos, never talked about it at work, but for 6 years, that gym was her sanctuary. She learned to grip when she wanted to run, to breathe when the world closed in, to survive without screaming. She became a purple belt, then a brown, and then finally a black awarded in a quiet moment after a brutal open sparring session. Her coach, Mestre Cardozo, didn't give speeches, just tied the belt, patted her shoulder once, and said, "You carry it well." That was the moment she finally believed it. Until life knocked again, harder this time. Her mother suffered a massive stroke. Her younger son needed special tutoring. The money ran out faster than she did. And just like that, she folded the gi, tucked it into a bin under her bed, and told herself it was time to grow up again. But something in her never really let go. She carried jiu-jitsu like a second skin under her work scrubs. She moved through hospitals, through grocery stores, through life, with that same quiet balance unseen by most. Even Noah didn't know. That's why this return wasn't for anyone else. It was for her. For the version of herself that never asked for applause, only space. And that's why Jace's laugh hadn't hurt her. She'd heard worse. She'd heard it from parents at PTA meetings who wondered out loud if a woman like her really belonged in their district. She'd heard it from male coworkers who assumed she was a nurse, not a supervisor. She'd heard it in the silence of job interviews, where her resume got compliments but not callbacks. Disrespect doesn't always come in shouts. Sometimes it drips low, constant, corrosive. But Danielle didn't let it soak in. Not anymore. When Coach Daniels called for another round, Danielle didn't raise her hand. She just sat, present. She wasn't here to prove anything. But still, people were watching now. Not with mockery, but with something else. Curiosity. Elliot stood by the edge of the mat, nervous fingers tapping the tape around his knuckles. He leaned over to the guy next to him. "She's on another level, man." The guy, Calvin, mid-50s, new white belt, peppermint-scented sweat, and all nodded slowly. "I've seen folks like her. Quiet ones. They don't come to show off. They come because they've already done the work." Danielle heard none of this. She was still in her breath, still centered. Coach Daniels paced quietly across the gym, pretending to inspect spacing. But his eyes kept drifting back. Because there's something about the way a person carries pain that's been repurposed, melted down, reforged into grace. You can't coach that. You can only respect it. Coach Daniels gave the nod. "Open mat. Choose your partner." A quiet wave moved across the gym, shifting energy, adjusting expectations. Danielle remained seated against the far wall, back straight, water bottle in hand. She wasn't hiding. She just wasn't rushing. Then came the voice. "Danielle, right?" Jace had recovered. Physically, at least. He stood near the center of the mat, trying to sound casual, but the undercurrent was clear. He needed something. Redemption? Control? Revenge? Want to roll again? he asked. The room froze. Danielle looked up, calm, collected, her face unreadable. Sure, she said softly, rising to her feet. This time, the hush fell heavier. The same way a room quiets when someone lights a match near gasoline. Danielle walked slowly, brushing a crease from her shirt. No swagger, no show, just grounded presence. She bowed. Jace bowed, backless, theatrical now. They touched hands. And everything stopped. Jace moved first, this time aggressive. He shot forward, trying to dominate position early. Danielle met him with grace, not retreat, just timing. She spun under him, framed her knee, and created space without panic. Her breathing never changed. He passed high. She let him. His knee cut through, heavy and fast but overcommitted. Danielle inverted, caught his wrist mid-transition, and rolled. A shift of her hips, a trap. Armbar. Deep. He didn't even try to power out this time. The tap came sharp. 3 times. Silence. Danielle released immediately. No flare, no flourish. She offered a hand. Jace hesitated, then took it. From the wall, Becca blinked like she hadn't seen what just happened. Not because it wasn't visible, but because the truth had landed so quickly it hadn't caught up with her emotions yet. Coach Daniels, hands on his hips, finally stepped forward. Danielle, he said, voice lower now, eyes narrowing with curiosity. You said you were new to this gym. I am, she replied. Where'd you train before? Danielle paused, just for a beat. Austin, she said. Texas. Something about the way she said it made the air shift. Coach tilted his head. How long? 6 years straight, she said. Couple more off and on. Jace stood off to the side now, rubbing the back of his neck. He wasn't making eye contact with anyone. Becca stepped forward. You've done this a long time. Danielle finally smiled, just barely. Yeah, she said. I have. Word spread fast. Not in gossip, but in glances. In the way people began approaching her. Rico, one of the more athletic white belts, asked quietly, "Want to go next?" Danielle nodded. Rico came in fast, controlled, respectful. He was good, young, strong, and smooth. Danielle slowed him down with precise grips and sharp timing. Every movement was economical. No waste, no flex. She swept him. Clean. He reset. Tried a knee cut. Danielle transitioned before he even committed the pass loop choke threat into a pendulum sweep. Tap. No celebration. Just a pat on the shoulder. Becca was next. Becca came harder. Danielle adjusted faster. They rolled longer, almost 3 minutes. It wasn't domination. It was education. Becca pushed. Danielle absorbed. Then, in a single breath, Danielle shifted her weight, took Becca's back, and sank in a rear naked choke. Becca tapped, then sat up smiling. Damn, she whispered. That was beautiful. Coach Daniels walked up again, more cautiously this time. You didn't mention Austin when you signed up. I didn't come here to talk, Danielle replied, not unkindly. He studied her. Who'd you train under? Mestre Cardozo, she said. A long pause. The name traveled across the room like thunder before a storm. Brazilian lineage? He asked, almost softly. Direct, Danielle said. He was my professor. Another pause. Becca turned. Wait, so, are you a black belt? Danielle didn't answer immediately. She reached for her towel, wiped her forehead, then looked Becca in the eye. I was, she said. I just don't wear it anymore. Nobody spoke. Not even Jace. Coach Daniels let the silence breathe for a few seconds. You should have said something, he finally said. Danielle's voice didn't rise. I didn't come here for that. I just wanted to train. And that was it. No speech, no monologue, just truth. But sometimes the truth lands louder than any raised voice. The room hadn't shifted with drama. It shifted with weight, with respect, with presence. Rico stepped forward again, a little hesitant. If you ever feel like showing a few details sometime, I'd love to learn. Danielle nodded. Sure. The next round was called. Danielle rolled with Calvin's low, steady, gentle, no pressure, just presence. Then Elliot again. Can I try that sweep you showed earlier? He asked. Of course, she said. Let's go slow. In that moment, Danielle wasn't just a visitor anymore. She was part of the room, not because she demanded it, but because her presence commanded it. Jace sat on the far bench, head down, fingers laced behind his neck. He looked smaller, not humiliated, but deflated, like someone who had just seen themselves clearly for the first time in a long while. Becca sat next to him, said nothing, because nothing needed to be said. Across the gym, Coach Daniels stood near the whiteboard, arms folded. He didn't bark instructions. He didn't have to. He was watching Danielle, watching the way Rico adjusted his grip after her correction, watching Elliot try a scissor sweep with a little more confidence, watching the room bend not around ego, but around something deeper. Skill, grace, stillness. By the end of open mat, Danielle had rolled with 6 different partners. Each time, she adjusted to their pace, respected their space, and gave more than she took. She wasn't there to collect taps. She was there to remember, to reclaim, to reconnect. And everyone in the room, whether they admitted it or not, was beginning to understand that the strongest people don't need spotlights. They just need room to breathe. The gym was winding down. Sweat glistened on foreheads. The thud of takedowns had softened, and the air smelled like effort, the clean kind, born from people pushing themselves past comfort. Danielle was sitting again, legs outstretched in front of her, elbows resting on her knees, her towel looped around the back of her neck. She didn't say much. She hadn't all night. But people noticed. They noticed how calm she stayed between rolls. They noticed how she gave room, not instruction unless asked. They noticed that she hadn't once checked her phone, adjusted the mirror, or posed for attention. Danielle just was. And in a place like Steel Core, where noise often stood in for confidence, that kind of presence stood taller than shouting ever could. Coach Daniels approached, not from a place of authority now, but almost like he was meeting a peer. You teaching anywhere else? Danielle shook her head. Not anymore. Ever think about doing it again? I don't know. Coach rubbed his jaw. We could use more people like you. Danielle didn't respond right away. Her eyes scanned the mat where Rico was showing Elliot a pass. Danielle had taught him just 30 minutes ago. The form wasn't perfect, but it was close. I'm not sure if I'm ready, she said honestly. Coach nodded. Fair. A few feet away, Jace hadn't rolled again since the triangle. He wasn't sulking. He wasn't even angry. He was recalibrating. That look a man gets when the story he told himself about himself starts to fall apart. Becca walked over, sat beside him. She didn't say much either, but her presence said what needed to be said. I saw it too. Across the gym, Calvin's peppermint-scented white belt was stretching near the edge of the mat. You know, he said out loud, not really to anyone in particular. I've seen a lot of belts come through places like this. Everyone glanced up. But I've never seen someone carry one without needing to wear it. Danielle glanced his way, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Rico chimed in. I still can't believe you tapped Jace in 14 seconds. Danielle raised an eyebrow. You counted? He grinned. Felt like a moment. She nodded once. Sometimes moments are louder than minutes. Coach Daniels cleared his throat. All right, bring it in. Everyone formed a loose half circle. Danielle stayed near the edge, towel around her shoulders, not leading, not hiding. Coach looked around the group. Tonight was solid. Everyone moved well, showed respect, pushed each other. He paused. But let's call out what's obvious. Some of you learned more in one night than you have in a month, and that's not because of me. He looked at Danielle. She didn't come in here yelling about stripes or ranks. She didn't bring a highlight reel. She just showed up and let her movement speak for her. A quiet hum of agreement moved through the circle. Some folks need to be loud to be noticed. Others carry enough truth to be quiet. No one needed a name. Everyone knew who he meant. Then, from the back, Becca raised a hand. Can she teach a fundamentals class? There were a few chuckles. Not mocking, genuine. Hopeful. Coach looked at Danielle. She didn't answer right away, just met his eyes. Then Becca's, then Rico's, then Elliot's. Finally, she said, I might be open to helping. A simple sentence. But in that moment, it felt like a door creaked open after being closed for years. Class dismissed. People moved to gather their gear, rolling belts, sipping water, tapping shoulders in thanks. Danielle packed slowly, with a quiet rhythm, folding her towel, slipping her shoes back on. She passed Jace on her way out. He stood awkwardly, still rubbing the side of his neck. Hey, he said, stopping her. She turned. He shifted his weight, unsure of what to do with his hands. Finally, he spoke. I was out of line earlier. Danielle didn't nod, didn't let him off with a smile. She just looked at him, let the moment sit. Yeah, she said. You were. Then she walked out. The air outside was cool and damp, the night settling over Columbus like a heavy blanket. Streetlights buzzed quietly. Her car sat alone near the far end of the lot. Danielle didn't rush to it. She stood there for a moment, breathing. Not tired, just full. The kind of fullness that comes not from winning but from returning, reclaiming, realizing that your power doesn't need to shout. It never did. Inside her car, her phone buzzed. Noah. Dinner? Should I start the pasta? She smiled. On my way. No soundtrack. No victory fist pump. Just Danielle. Just now. Just enough. Dinner that night was spaghetti from a box and garlic toast from the freezer. Nothing fancy. Nothing planned. Just warmth in a bowl. Noah sat at the table with his earbuds hanging around his neck, tapping at his phone, eyes flicking toward his mom as she moved around the kitchen. You good? He asked between bites. Danielle nodded. Jim was all right? She paused for a moment at the sink, drying her hands. Then, with a small smile, yeah, it was. He squinted at her, reading her the way only a son can. You roll with anybody? She looked over her shoulder. A few people. He smirked. Bet they didn't see you coming. Danielle didn't reply, but the glint in her eye said enough. After dishes, she sat in her room for a while. No TV, no scrolling, just stillness. She thought about Austin, about that open-air gym with the busted fans and cracked concrete, about Mestre Cardozo, who once told her, the loudest person in the room is usually the one trying to believe himself. She thought about Jace, not with bitterness, not with satisfaction, just clarity, about how some men only learn after they're on their backs, looking up at a ceiling that no longer bends to their narrative. She thought about Coach Daniels and the way his voice shifted, not softer, but more careful, like he had finally learned that respect isn't owed by age or title, but by how you carry what you've survived. She thought about Elliot, nervous hands, eager questions, a hunger that reminded her of a younger version of herself, before the world made her quiet, before she learned to hold her pain like a discipline. And she thought about Becca, smart, sharp, aware, watching, really watching. That's when Danielle reached under her bed and pulled out the old shoebox. Inside, folded and fraying at the edges, lay her black belt. It smelled faintly of sweat, dust, and time. She held it in her hands, fingers tracing the seams like reading a language she'd almost forgotten. Then, gently, she folded it again. She wasn't ready to wear it. Not yet. But she was ready to stop hiding from it. The next morning, as the sun stretched over Columbus and the city started humming with traffic and timelines and forgotten alarms, Danielle texted Coach Daniels. Hey, I'd be down to help out on Mondays. If you ever need a hand with the beginner class, no pressure. A few minutes later, the reply came. Absolutely. Let's talk tonight. She smiled. Not wide, just true. That evening, when she stood in front of the mirror, she didn't see a fighter. She didn't see a teacher. She didn't even see the woman who'd choked out a brown belt in 14 seconds. She saw herself. Just Danielle. Green t-shirt, hair tied back, calm. And that was enough. When she walked into Steel Core that night, nobody turned to look. Nobody clapped. Nobody called her out. But Coach gave her a nod. A different kind of nod. Becca waved as she stretched. Rico bumped her fist. Elliot smiled without saying anything. Danielle moved to the corner, started stretching slowly, letting the rhythm return to her bones. And somewhere deep inside the room, something had changed. Not the mats, not the drills, not even the hierarchy, but the feeling that maybe, just maybe, the space had grown a little wider, that someone else, someday soon, might walk through those same doors nervous, quiet, unsure, and see her there in the corner, steady, unbothered, unapologetic. And maybe they'd stay. Maybe they'd roll. And maybe, because Danielle stayed, they would too. Because not all legacies wear plaques. Not all leaders raise their voices. Some just show up. Again and again. Until the room learns their name without needing to speak it. Sometimes, the most powerful stories aren't shouted. They're lived in silence, in quiet rooms where someone dares to show up as they are. Danielle didn't walk in asking for validation. She didn't reclaim her past with noise. She simply moved with truth and reminded us all that dignity doesn't need permission to stand tall. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on the spaces you've walked into and the rooms you've helped others feel safe in. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe for more real, human stories like this. Stories of quiet strength, deep healing, and unseen courage. Because real presence doesn't demand applause, it simply makes space for others to belong. Stay tuned.